That's the width of the Strait of Hormuz at its narrowest point, a distance a commercial jet covers in under 2 minutes, a distance a modern ballistic missile crosses in seconds. Yet through that narrow corridor, barely wider than the English Channel, flows nearly 1/5 of the world's entire petroleum supply every single day. Rain or shine, peace or tension. For 40 years, the United States Navy has stood watch over that corridor. Fifth Fleet, carrier strike groups, Aegis destroyers, the most sophisticated surface combat force in human history, positioned at the world's most strategically critical waterway. But in the past decade, something fundamental has shifted. A question that military planners in Tehran began asking 20 years ago has now produced an answer that every navy, every defense ministry, and every energy market on the planet is being forced to process. What happens when the world's most powerful navy meets a missile system specifically designed to defeat it in a body of water barely wide enough to maneuver? This is the story of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's anti-access strategy, and why the answer to that question matters for every country on Earth.
To understand why the Strait of Hormuz is uniquely dangerous for surface warships, you have to think like the geography itself. The strait runs roughly northwest to southeast, between Iran to the north and the Omani Peninsula of Musandam to the south. At its narrowest, near the island of Keshem, it measures just 33 kilometers across. The actual navigable shipping lanes are even narrower. 2 inbound lanes, 2 outbound, each only about 3 kilometers wide, separated by a 2-kilometer buffer zone. For a warship, this creates an immediate tactical problem. The first principle of naval defense is standoff distance, putting enough water between your vessel and a threat that your defensive systems have time to react. In the Strait of Hormuz, that principle is simply not available. The Iranian coastline is always within minutes of flight time for any weapon system capable of crossing those distances. The northern shore, the Iranian side, is not flat beach. It is a complex geography of hills, ridgelines, and coastal valley. Natural concealment for radar systems, natural cover for missile battery, natural shelter for the fast attack boat swarms that have been central to Iranian naval doctrine since the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. Iran controls roughly 1,500 kilometers of Gulf coastline. It has spent decades studying how to use every kilometer of it. The islands compound this advantage. Abu Musa, the Greater and Lesser Tons, strategically positioned islands in the central Gulf that Iran seized or asserted control over in the early 1970s, provide forward positions that extend Iran's surveillance and strike reach well into the Gulf itself. The geography, in short, was always going to favor the defender over the attacker. What changed over the past 20 years is the quality of the weapons that defender could bring to bear.
The strategic concept behind Iran's approach to the strait has a formal name in military theory: anti-access area denial, abbreviated A2AD. The basic logic is straightforward. If you cannot match a superior military force symmetrically, ship for ship, aircraft for aircraft, you invest instead in capabilities specifically designed to make that superior force's presence prohibitively costly. You don't try to defeat the enemy's navy in open ocean combat. You make the specific waters you need to control too dangerous for that navy to operate. Iran began developing this doctrine seriously after the 1991 Gulf War, when the scale of American conventional military superiority became undeniable. The conclusion Iranian planners reached was not we need to build a bigger navy. It was we need to make American naval power irrelevant in the specific geography that matters to us. The investment that followed this insight spread across 3 interconnected capabilities. First, mine. Iran has one of the largest naval mine inventories in the world, estimated at several thousand mines of various types. Mining the strait, scattering contact mines and influence mines across the shipping lanes, could close the waterway to commercial traffic within hours and would require weeks or months of dangerous minesweeping operations to clear. Second, fast attack craft. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard naval force has developed a doctrine of swarming attacks using large numbers of small, fast, heavily armed boats. Individually, each boat is vulnerable. In swarms of dozens or hundreds, coordinated to attack simultaneously from multiple directions, they create an engagement processing problem that even sophisticated defensive systems struggle with. Third, missiles. And this is where the most significant evolution has occurred. not just cruise missiles, though Iran has those in substantial numbers, but specifically anti-ship ballistic missiles, weapons that attack from above, not from the horizon. The logic of using ballistic missiles against surface ships is rooted in a specific vulnerability of the world's most advanced naval air defense systems. The Aegis Combat System, the integrated radar and missile defense architecture that equips American destroyers and cruisers, was designed primarily in the Cold War era to defend against Soviet anti-ship cruise missiles. These weapons fly relatively flat, sea-skimming trajectories. Aegis was optimized for that threat geometry, and it performs impressively against it. An anti-ship ballistic missile attacks from a fundamentally different angle. It launches on a high arc, rises into the upper atmosphere, then dives steeply toward its target in the terminal phase. The steep descent angle compresses the reaction time available to ship-based defensive systems. It arrives from above rather than from the horizon, challenging radar coverage geometries. And if the warhead maneuvers in the terminal phase, adjusting its trajectory to track a moving ship, the fire control solution calculated earlier in the flight becomes inaccurate before an interceptor can reach it. China's development of the DF-21D, the so-called carrier killer, demonstrated that this concept was technically achievable. Iran studied that development closely and pursued its own variant, reportedly called the College Farce, meaning Persian Gulf in Farsi. The College Farce combines a ballistic trajectory with an active radar seeker in the terminal phase that can autonomously acquire and track surface vessels. It carries a warhead sufficient to cause severe damage to a destroyer-class vessel with a single hit. The deeper challenge for naval planners isn't any single weapon system. It's the combination. When surface ships must simultaneously defend against high-altitude ballistic threats, medium-altitude cruise missiles, sea-skimming anti-ship missiles, and fast-attack boat swarms, all arriving from different directions at different altitudes with different radar signatures, the number of simultaneous defensive engagement tracks required can exceed the capacity of any currently deployed system. This is the core of Iran's anti-access strategy. Not a single decisive weapon, but a coordinated multi-layer threat environment that overloads defensive systems through volume, variety, and simultaneity.
The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a military geography. It's the circulatory system of the global economy. Approximately 17 to 21 million barrels of crude oil transit the strait every single day. That represents roughly 17 to 20% of total global petroleum consumption. The primary destinations are Japan, South Korea, India, China, and increasingly European market. None of these economies has a short-term substitute for Gulf petroleum at the volumes the current global energy system requires. When analysts talk about the Strait of Hormuz being the world's most important choke point, the numbers justify the description. No other single geographical location comes close. The Suez Canal handles roughly 12% of global trade by volume. The Strait of Malacca carries enormous Asian trade. But for raw energy dependency, Hormuz is in a category of its own. A partial or complete closure of the strait doesn't produce a proportional economic response. Energy markets price not just current supply, but expected future supply. A demonstrated capability to close the strait, even temporarily, introduces a permanent risk premium into global energy price. Insurance underwriters revise their Gulf coverage, shipping companies reroute or anchor. Spot prices spike not because supply has actually stopped, but because the possibility of disruption has become credible in a new way. The economic leverage this geography provides to Iran is arguably more important strategically than the military leverage. The ability to threaten global energy markets, to impose costs on the entire international system without firing a single shot, is a form of strategic power that sanctions, financial pressure, and military superiority cannot simply neutralize. Where does this leave us? The United States maintains its Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. It operates multiple air bases across the Gulf region. It has carrier strike groups capable of projecting enormous air power against Iranian territory. American military technology remains, in most domains, significantly more advanced than anything Iran can field. But technological superiority in the abstract and operational dominance in the specific geography of the Persian Gulf are not the same thing. The engagement geometry of the strait, narrow, enclosed, surrounded by Iranian-controlled terrain, systematically advantages the weapons Iran has chosen to develop. American surface vessels operating in the strait are operating in the optimal employment environment for Iranian anti-access capabilities. The same vessels operating in open ocean, thousands of miles from Iranian coastline, operate in an environment where American technological advantages reassert themselves decisively. This creates a genuine strategic tension that has no simple resolution. American commitments to Gulf allies, American interest in freedom of navigation, and American credibility as a security guarantor all create pressure for a persistent naval presence in the Gulf. But the demonstrated anti-access capabilities that Iran has developed mean that presence carries risks that were not present, or not as acute, a decade ago. The response strategies being discussed in Western defense establishments focus on several directions. More capable missile defense, specifically interceptors designed for the high-angle ballistic threat geometry. Greater reliance on submarines, which are not vulnerable to the surface threat environment Iran has optimized against. Longer-range strike capabilities that can threaten Iranian launch infrastructure from outside its engagement envelope. And doctrinal evolution away from the persistent surface presence model toward more dispersed, less predictable operational patterns. Iran's strategic calculation is that the cost of contesting American naval presence in the Gulf, the investment in mines, missiles, fast boats, and the trained personnel to employ them, is worth paying, because the alternative is accepting permanent foreign military dominance over the waters that Iranian strategic culture regards as its own domain. That conviction predates the Islamic Republic. It will likely outlast whatever political configuration governs Iran in the future. It is rooted in geography, in history, and in a national strategic identity that is not going to be negotiated away or deterred out of existence.
The Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide and thousands of years old. The economic systems depending on it took a century to build. The geopolitical assumptions surrounding it have shaped American foreign policy since the 1970s. What the past decade of military development in Iran has demonstrated is that geography, patience, and asymmetric investment can shift strategic balances that conventional military superiority alone cannot reverse. Whether you view that through the lens of Iranian strategic success, American strategic challenge, or simply as a case study in how military competition actually works in the modern world, the Strait of Hormuz remains the waterway where those questions have their sharpest and most consequential expression. The ships move through it every day. The missiles wait on the hills above it. The balance between those two facts is what global security in the Persian Gulf now rests on.